we have to go further, and I do feel optimistic though. Activism is not enough. We also have to take on the formal world of politics. We have to break into it. We have to take it over. And that's very hard to do. And I've thought about this many times over the years, that intersection between what you might call social movement politics or activism politics and the formal world of politics, where the rules are sometimes weird and crazy, and they don't make sense, and they're sexist, and they're hierarchical, and they're exclusionary. But unless we break into that world, I fear that we won't see the transformative changes that we need. And I do believe that today's report is an incredible opportunity, is an historic moment in Canada, whereby this body of activism has culminated now in a formal public inquiry and report. And we listened to the Prime Minister saying, well, he's going to take it up and it's not going to be forgotten. But that's going to be up to us to do. Because if we don't, it will actually gather dust on the shelves, despite what he says. And so it is this notion of bringing the activism to the inside. I don't believe we have to sell ourselves out. We don't have to lose our principles. We can be part of both worlds. But if we're not, we'll always be excluded. So to me, that's what's hopeful about activism, is that I think particularly younger women are getting that and realizing that they've got to get in there, and we've got to change it from the outside in, we've got to change it from the inside out, both ways, and that activism actually can help transform the political world. So I feel very hopeful that we're on the path to do that.
I'm just going to follow that thread down a little bit, because I think you've raised a really important point. But how difficult is it still for women to own ambition and to say, I want power. I want to be in a position of power to do, and insert whatever there, but you're talking about fighting a cause that you really believe in. But it seems to me that women are still shy of just stating their ambitions around holding power in a way that men aren't. And so, right from my experience, visiting schools, you'd meet lots of 7 or 8 year olds, but they tended to be boys who would say to you, I want to be Prime Minister when I grow up, through to, even in the primaries in the US, it was later received as gaffe, but Beto saying, I was born for this. You imagine if a woman walked out the door and said, being US President, I was born for this, the reaction she would have gotten. How do we get to a stage where women are confident to say, I've got an idea, it's my values, I want to bring change, and I want the power to do it, and I'm questing for the power. Anybody like to buy into that? Yes?
Yeah, I'll say something.
Thanks, Laura.
I think one thing that goes on with that particular idea is the problem of what it means to hold power or have power. And I do think that feminist activists, feminist academics have helped us understand what it means to exercise power. So it's really kind of a myth, right, that you elect somebody or that somebody's at the top and that they just, everything they say falls, like, hey, people who right? Kennedy, you get up there, you can't get anybody to do anything, nobody does what you say. So really, I think, my own very limited brush was being vice provost of Purdue University, and that's when you find people say, well, you're a vice provost, you say, nobody listens to me. And it's really true for everybody, so that really being in those positions of power really means that you're part of a system, and it really depends on everybody kind of going along. So this is part of the thing that feminist activists understood, because they understood that if they didn't go along, that was a problem for the people in power, right? So that's where a lot of this kind of insight about protest comes from, is that if you don't comply with these norms, you can really disrupt institutions in a pretty fundamental way. We should not forget that. But the other thing is that when you're in those positions of power, you also can't forget it, right? Positions of power. right? You need people to go along with you. You have to be a leader, not just somebody who's sitting in a position of power. You have to, remember to empower those who are working for you. Just as you were saying, Cecilia, earlier about, people saying to you, I'm going to empower you. I mean, that's actually a very effective model of leadership, and it's a way of exercising power that is actually entirely consistent, I think, with feminist principles about what it means seeing power and empowerment as being related to each other. So I don't think we should be shy about saying we want to be in those positions of power, particularly when we have a feminist understanding, which I think is actually a more accurate understanding of how power works.
And I think we need to do it differently. I had the great privilege of hearing Angela Davis a couple of years ago, and she said, women are moving to the front now, and she said we need to do it differently. We shouldn't do it in this patriarchal way. And I think about two of my aunties, who had kids between them, and one would look after the kids while the other one went to school for 3 years. Like we need to help each other out. Or even Jenny bringing her mom to the office to look after her baby while she was there. Like we need to do it differently, and it shouldn't look weird to people that we're all working collaboratively and helping each other look after our children, each other's children. And when I go to school, I line up an army of people to help me. It's like this one's going to deliver meals, this one's going to take my kids to a movie. This, you know what I mean? So I think in government that shouldn't look weird. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, right? With her baby in Parliament. So I think that needs to start looking normal to us.
I do think that power is one of those iconic words that evokes an emotional response from us rather than an objective response. And when we think of power, the image that comes to mind often is of men who are in very powerful positions who accomplish what they want to do. So I do think that when we talk about power, we have to speak about power for whom, on whose behalf are we acting? Is it in the public interest? Is it in a private interest? You think about power and you think about all of the leaders, most often, not always, but most often men who went to war on the basis of power, right? So I think the notion we have about it is creating winners and losers. So I would agree with other panelists who said that I think it's how we look at it and how we look at it differently. Power to me is about addressing imbalances and inequities. It's about social justice. It's about sharing. To me, that's what power is about, being part of a team, as opposed to something that's vested in a single individual who somehow has all of the answers, which I think is just nonsense. So I think we have to kind of deconstruct the word and make it our word in terms of how we see power and how we want to share that with other people.
Thank you. Joy?
Yeah, I really agree with you, Libby, on that, about power being emotional and very contextual. And, we not only take power, but we also give power. And I was really fortunate to be able to hear Angelique Kidjo speak this afternoon. And she was talking a little bit about the power of silence. That when we are silent, that is actually a giving of power to others. And so we have to learn how not to be so silent as well in terms of those power. And it is really about a power imbalances. And we have to be very, very mindful and smart and creative and intelligent about how we make those balances, improve those balances where we're not hurting others.
I'm going to pull a thread from something Cecilia said earlier where she mentioned social media, and as we're looking at activism, campaigning, I just wanted us to spend a little bit of time thinking about the role that social media plays in that. Because on the one hand, it's been exponentially empowering for activists and campaigners. And if we look at something like the Me Too movement, there's no way in other parts of human history that a movement could have swept the globe as quickly as the Me Too movement did. So it's the power of social media. But we also know the huge huge toxicity that exists on social media for women. And to give you an example of that, there's a woman in the UK called Carolyn Prioto Perez. She's written a book about gender biases in data, but before that book, she came to public attention in the UK because she campaigned, mainly through online campaign activism, to get a woman on a British banknote. So obviously they have the Queen on one side, but in terms of who's honoured on the other side, she got Jane Austen on the £10 note. And in the Parliamentary Square, there was statues of men who had done important things in the history of the UK, but there was no one of a woman. And she campaigned for a statue of Millicent Fawcett, who had been very big in the movement to get women the vote. Now, they might seem like, they're important things, but you would think in some ways they're benign things that people would either get on that campaign or say, it doesn't really matter that much to me. But her actual experience was that in 1 hour, looking at her social media, she received 50 death and rape threats. That was the nature of the response. So the toxicity of putting yourself out in the public arena, campaigning for things like a women's statue. So how do we think about social media and how as activists do we use it without having it overpower us? I think this is a really common experience for women who don't even necessarily put themselves all the way out there in the public square, but who get energised and motivated around a cause. Are there any reflections on that?
Well, I feel like we have a love-hate relationship with social media. It is a very powerful, we've been talking about power, it is a very powerful tool, and I think we should use every tool we've got to bring about change. So it is a way for people to have their voice heard. It's a way to connect. It's a way to show solidarity around something. So those are all generally positive things, but it does have just the most incredible hateful side to it. And I always wonder, like, who are these people? Like, do they have partners? Do they have kids? Like, who are they that they have this license to go out and say misogynist things, hateful things, death threats and all the rest of it? And I know probably all of us have experienced that in one way or another, and it's very toxic in the political environment. So I wouldn't say that, we should dismiss social media. It's there, it is a tool. I think we have to have a lot more education about respectful debate, and maybe it gets back to Joy's earlier point about needing to begin at the beginning with young people, really young people, about what is hate and what, and to differentiate between hateful attacks and genuine disagreement in public discourse, right? And to try and instill that, because it is getting stronger and stronger. So I do feel that, it sounds so lame to say education, but I don't know what else to say, other than we keep calling it out. We do have to keep calling it out. But I think education is, particularly for young people, is a key component.
I guess one thing I'd say is, so just recently we're doing some field research in northern part of Tanzania, and one of the researchers who's doing this is saying a story. There's a woman in the village who's trying to help other women in the village get some economic independence, and she's been quite successful. And what her success has won her is that the men in the village have formed these vigilante groups who try to harass all the women who try to have their own businesses. But they specifically go after this woman who runs this organization to try to help women get economic independence, because they don't like her putting ideas in the women's heads. They threaten her, they use violence to basically try to prevent her from making a difference. So I guess on the one hand, the toxicity is certainly new, and we have to be thinking about it. But in another way, it's not that new. It's the same old way of trying to keep women in their place, and we ought not to tolerate it. And one of the things is that, I mean, it's still happening in non-social media venues, right, quite a bit as well. We know that from studies of violence against women who went for public office, and for some of these other things, there's quite a bit of violence and harassment of women in really every sphere of life. So that's the social media in that sense is just no difference. Perhaps one thing that's a little different is that because it's a newer medium, we don't have a good sense of what norms are. So we don't really know what to say when somebody does. But I mean, really, you really shouldn't need education to know that you're not supposed to give somebody a rape threat on social media. I worry that that's a little bit, that's not, you know, we shouldn't need that. You know, that should be something that people can figure out. So, you know, I guess in one sense is the same things that we try to do in other places, where we're trying to combat hateful and threatening speech. Really, social media is no different than some of those other places. We don't tolerate it. We tell people we have, you know, ways that we try to work against bullying. There are some technical issues that are different, but I do think the fundamental insight that those kinds of things are unacceptable and need to be combated is not bad.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out where the mindset is coming from. And again, when you look at the guy from the South, who just full-on bullies and attacks people on social media like the fish rots from the head type thing. But I just really don't know why I don't know why it's happening. I mean, for us, social media in activism, like you said, you know, the hashtags and so on, and we used it really to mobilize people. And when we had an emergency and needed everyone to come down to the front line with us, we would just, you know, tweet it out, and everyone would come. We'd have 100 people there all of a sudden. So in that sense, it's really powerful. And the bullying used to be just anonymous in the comments pages, and now I literally can't get over that people put their face, their name, you know, attach them to these hateful comments. And yeah, why don't they know that rape threats and death threats are, you know, not a good thing? Like, I can't figure it out. Like, just like I can't figure out the hard swing to the right, and so I don't know why.
Yeah, so I'm probably the only one that, you know, I do see social media as a tool, and we're all learning how to use it. And maybe, you know, we need to really be, again, from a very young start, and I don't know how we do this because, you know, 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds are using devices, etc. It can be a very powerful tool, technology and social media. But we need to learn how to use them appropriately and have the, you know, really have the values that will make them a useful tool and not a destructive tool.
And I think there's also, I mean, the responsibility of the technology companies here, and no one would ever confuse me for a Silicon Valley sort of tech person, but it's got to be possible, doesn't it, to change protocols and algorithms so that material like that doesn't come up in people's feeds. I'm conscious that our time together is drawing towards a close, but I did want to get a last contribution from everyone, and the last contribution is really looking out in the audience, different ethnicities, different walks of life, but there are quite a number of young women here. And so particularly for those young women, I did want to conclude by asking each of you what your message to young women activists would be. It could be something that you would urge them to be active around an issue. It could be a strategy that you would suggest to them. It could be a self-preservation tip as an activist. It could be something you wish you knew when you were a little bit younger. Any and all of those, very welcome. So, go down the panel.
Well, I look at my daughter who's, you know, in her first year of university, and, you know, I certainly dragged my kids to a lot of things, and they would just stand there and sometimes they and now she's at university and she's learning so much. She's taking Indigenous studies, women's studies, and all of these things, so she's right in the thick of it. And I think my advice to her and to all young women is to stay on top of that. Like, it's very frightening how it can turn turn from complacency. So don't be complacent. I mean, the fight's not over. And we need allyship. We can't work in a vacuum. And for us, when we had to take the bridge in 2012, to put it I can't put it any other way, all of the neighbors in Vancouver, a lot of them, came down and stood with us. So reach out to your allies. Try not to work in a vacuum. As soon as we told them, that they were digging up bodies and, to put a parking lot, people were like, that's, they understood that right away, and thousands of signatures on petitions and lobbying their MLAs and so on. I mean, you need to reach out, and there were some days when I would just be sitting there in a plastic chair by myself, and without allies, those would have been a lot more times. And I actually have a plea for all of you, for our sisters up in Unistoten, that they really need allies this summer. So if you have time, go out and learn how to live off the land. I mean, and finally, that's the last thing I want to say, is that when we were sitting there, my sister and I, initially we were like, well, what are we going to do for food? And where are we going to go to the washroom and stuff? And our fishermen came in from the water, and the women from the downtown east side came and brought us a deer stew, and we built a fire under a garbage can. Everybody pitched in, and we could make it. Like if the big one hit and we lost all our power and everything, we could make it. I really encourage you to get out there and try to live without technology and electricity, and we live in this place where you just need to walk out into the woods 10 minutes from here and you can calm right down. And I really mean that. It's really important for you to ground yourself and breathe in that clean air and appreciate it now, because Alberta's on fire right now, and that's not what we want. So look after this place for the next 7 generations, OCM.
That's tough to follow, but that sounds like excellent advice. I think I should take that. I would only add that I think for young people, the answer should be, especially for young women, but really for all young people, is that you shouldn't wait for someone to ask you to do something. Don't wait for somebody else. Don't wait for the perfect opportunity. You have to make the difference yourself. So if you want a different world, you start now. Not too late, you're not too young, you're not too old, you should start now. And think of what you want and start figuring out a way to do it, and just start. Don't wait for anybody else. And you can go and talk to our mayor or people in parliament or just people in your community or your brothers and sisters or your family or anybody. A lot of people will help you. I think you're right about that. If you just figure out what you want to do, start it. The old aphorism, women don't agonize, organize, is true for everybody, right? Don't agonize, organize. It's important right now. And it really is, as Celia said, a life-threatening situation. We have climate change, we have violence against women, our reproductive rights are being taken away. Everybody here has a life on the line. The planet is on the line. And we really don't have the luxury of waiting around to be rescued by a knight in shining armor. We don't have the privilege to wait around for the right organization to come along for us to donate to, the one that perfectly matches our ideological views. Make it, do it yourself. So that's all I would just say, is you have to do it with your friends, not on your own. But do it now. Don't wait.
Yeah, I agree with Laurel. I probably agree with Libby too. I think activism really comes in many different forms. So you don't necessarily have to be the person who says, okay, I have to go out there and change the world. We all change the world in our different ways. Like this, you're making a difference right now thing on my thing. That's ways that we can do it. But it's about getting the passion, having the courage, stepping up, building your confidence. And women really have to work on building confidence, because if you want to appear competent, those incompetent men appear competent, then you have to be confident. And so that's a self-growth kind of thing. that we need to have happen. And then you can just start having the tough conversations even with your neighbors. That's a type of activism. If your passion, Angelique Kidjo was talking about her passion for music and how that was something that keeps her going, and builds her relationship with the world through music. So whatever it is, whatever way you figure out how to do it, it's just kind of getting there, and then staying with it because it's so hard. And the staying with it will happen if you do it together with other people. And so find your buddies, your activist buddies, and build together. And then the other thing is always remember to look after yourself. So there's a resilience. You really do need to make sure that other things don't get lost, that we don't lose, really, really important relationships, those types of things. The world will keep going. I know it's a bit urgent now, but you still need to look after yourself because otherwise we can't make the change. So thank you. Get out there. It's fun too.
Lots of fun. We always think of politics or change is about what we stand for, what we believe in, which is, of course, totally true. I've come to learn that it's as much about how we do our politics, how we bring about that change, how we work with other people, that is equally as important. And I think we've actually talked a lot about that tonight in gendered terms. So building confidence. I do think that building genuine relationships with people is critical to bringing about change and building your own confidence and feeling that you have support. I don't think we do that enough. We don't focus on those relationships that we need to foster and nurture. We don't learn enough how we need to support each other as women, as people working on common issues. So I think we could, reach out across the aisle, so to speak, a lot more and figure out what we do have in common. The left is terrible at the way it divides itself, if I can put it that way. The divisiveness and the name-calling, judgment. I really hate that side of politics, and I really want to see a different kind of politics where people are much more respectful, even of their adversaries, but respectful of the work that we're doing as allies and seeing ourselves as allies with each other. So to me, it is about building relationships, genuine relationships. And Julia, I'd like to throw it back to you, because you have a wealth of experience, and we've been answering your questions. I want to throw it back to you and say, you've been right there. What words of advice do you have for women who want to become involved in the political arena? What is it that they need to know that will sustain them?
Well, I'm happy to conclude on that and keep us on time. First, I always say to young women who are interested in politics, absolutely go for it. I don't try and insult people's intelligence by suggesting there's no gender bit. There's still a gender bit. But I think if you've got that sense of passion, and I'm a believer in politics, I think there's no better way of putting your values into action than through a political path. There are other ways of putting your values into action, but I think politics gives you the most ability to do that. So I believe in politics, in people going into politics, in women in particular going into politics. So go for it. You need to know why you're there. You need to have a clear sense of purpose. The life is too hard if you go into it for the celebrity aspects or the applause, because there are always the days that none of that's working for you. So you need that clear sense of purpose. And I think it's really important to have a sense of self that's not hostage to what others say about you. And that doesn't mean you should be immune to constructive criticism, but there's a lot of toxicity, and if you're going to feel good on a day headlines or social media is running well for you, and bad on a day that it's running badly for you, then you'll just be on this emotional roller coaster, because both will happen, and it's fundamentally irrational because you're really the same person with the same mix of strengths and weaknesses both days, so you can't contract out your sense of self. And I'll conclude by explaining how I got an early lesson in that when I was first campaigning in 1998 for my seat in the Federal Parliament in Melbourne's West, a seat called Lawler. One of the curious things that happens to you when you're a political candidate is you get taken into a professional photo shoot, so hair, makeup, flattering lighting. They get the best possible photo of you that could ever be taken. That's your campaign photo. And then you end up on a cold day, hunched into a coat with a scarf, windswept, your hair's everywhere, your lips are a little bit blue, and that perfect photo is next to you on the sort of the cuttable or the A-frame. And that happened to me one day when I was campaigning in 1998. And this older man walked across the street and looked at me and looked at the poster and looked at me and looked at the poster and then looked back at me and said, "Taken on a good day, wasn't it, love?" To which I said, "And you'd be bloody Robert Redford, would you, mate?" To which he endearingly said, "I'm going to vote for you," to which I said, "You're bloody well better off with you." He sort of walked away, but there will always be that kind of moment. So don't contract out your sense of self. We've had a wonderful evening. You've been a fantastic audience. Thank you for being here. And I could see from the head nodding and all the rest of it that people were really into the discussion, and that's only happened because we've had such a wonderful panel. So Libby, Joy, Laurel, Cecilia. Australia and play moderator. I very much enjoyed it. Thank you.